Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, are you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans? It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to the listeners and viewers at home. And since I can do the alphabet, we're going to start with Mr. James JE Pittman.
Hey everybody, I'm James JE Pittman. I write the Felix Chance Darkly Cozy Urban Fantasy series. I also write the Pandora Squad Military Action Sci-Fi series. And a lot of the stuff that I write that hasn't been published yet is, kind of near future, post-apocalyptic, what-if scenario stuff. That's kind of what I cut my teeth on writing. So glad to be here talking about what happens after.
Nice. Next, we have Mr. Outlaw author himself, Jesse James Fain.
Hey, everybody. I am Jesse James Fain, sometimes known as the Outlaw author. I write science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, mil sci-fi, pretty much anything that involves a sword fight, fist fight, or a gunfight. I focus on martial tales, often including revenge. And I am very excited for Post-Apocalyptic. I have not written a lot of it yet, but it is one of my favorite genres when done well, and includes a lot of themes like revenge. So I'm ready to get to it.
Nice. Next, we have Mr. JT Arralle. I probably butchered your last name. I got no excuses. I should have asked before to remember the pronunciation.
Yeah, no problem. It's JT Arralle, and I write science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Usually, most of my stuff deals with a lot of post-apocalyptic or my characters causing the apocalypse. So,
nice.
A little bit of interesting tales there.
All right. I mean, if you can't cause the apocalypse among friends, what are they good for anyway, right?
Right.
Next, we have the legendary Mr. Rick Shaw.
I'm Rick Shaw. I write post-apocalyptic, paranormal, alternate history, sci-fi, thriller, bounce around things. Current series is a post-apocalyptic pandemic series called Genesis Renewed. It's 2 books out. Third one will be out hopefully later this year.
Nice. And since this is airing in December, that means you got a lot of work to do in very little time. And if you want to listen to that episode that he did where we talked about that is in season 4, so check it out. And you have the handy search function if you want to go through the YouTube at least. When you go to the Blasters and Blades page, there's a little magnifying glass. You click it, people, and you can type in who you want to watch. And you can find it within our website too. So, and last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Shane Gries.
Hi, all. I'm Shane. I did 30 years in the Army as an infantry officer. I started writing books about 4 years ago, kind of applying my military experience to military science fiction. And then more recently, I started writing zombie apocalypse novels. Again, military units caught up in the zombie apocalypse. Not like your usual zombie apocalypse novels with military people where you got these tier 1 operators, special ops guys, door kickers. These are line unit folks from their perspective, and it's been pretty popular.
Nice. And then last but certainly not least on this introduction, dear listener, is we have to tell you how we first met. But this is kind of classified, so just pretend you didn't hear this, but we're going to say it anyway. We all actually met at Shane's class on how to become the post-apocalyptic warlord the Japanese think we are, and he was teaching this course on the proper attire, the right uniform to set that kind of je ne sais quoi that you want. So that's where we all met. We were taking the course. It was outstanding work, by the way, Shane. I highly recommend everyone take that with you.
You weren't supposed to tell him, JR. You weren't supposed to tell him.
I knew I should have read the fine print on that NDA. All right. And since this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we do have the religion question. All right. I am legend, the road or the day after tomorrow? James.
All right. So while I love the library scene where they're arguing over the Gutenberg Bible versus tax code for what to burn and day after tomorrow, I have to go with I Am Legend, just because that whole movie was just great. It's one of the better horror adaptations from a novella that I've seen. It was very intense, very, yeah. The novella was better, of course, but the movie, for what it was, excellent.
All right, but what would you have burned, the Gutenberg Bible or the tax code?
Tax pages.
You get more out of it. It's bigger. So, you get more fire.
Get a bigger bonfire out of the tax code.
That's right. And you'd be doing the world a net positive. So I say that's a win. All right, Rick.
Oh, loved Day After Tomorrow. Would definitely have burned the tax code. Really loved I Am Legend as a movie. Liked the book better. So it's a coin toss there. I love the idea of burning the tax code. I got to go Day After Tomorrow.
All right, Jesse.
Anything but the road. Not to yuck anybody's yum, but aside from the Coca-Cola scene, that book's painful and not in a fun way. But being positive, Day After Tomorrow for sure.
Okay, JT.
Yeah, I'm with everybody else on this one. Day After Tomorrow for sure, and definitely burning the tax code.
Yep. All right, Shane.
I'm a I Am Legend fan, big time. The movie was really great. I like this Last Man on Earth kind of stuff. I loved Omega Man. An earlier iteration of it. Charlton Heston was the boss, and at much urging one of my more well-read friends said I actually had to break down and read I Am Legend. So within the last year I actually did that, and I like that too. It's all different spin on it. Loved all three iterations of it.
It's a good read.
Okay.
It's a very period piece, though.
Excellent one, yeah.
I enjoyed all of them, but just for the tax code scene, I have to give it to the Day After Tomorrow as well. This would have been more appropriate if we recorded this on tax day in April, but I didn't think that far ahead, clearly. All right, and because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, the Book of Eli, World War Z, or 28 Days Later. All right, we have James.
Book of Eli. Denzel knocked that out.
Absolutely. Rick?
Oh, World War Z, the book and the audio book. If you have not listened to the audio book, take the time, buy the sucker, and listen. Because Max Brooks's Hollywood connections, it's entirely cast. You're listening to this thing and going, I know that voice. Oh, that's David Ogden Steyer. Oh, I mean, just, oh God, the list of folks' voices you're going to recognize. Alan Alda, it's amazing.
Okay, Jesse?
All three. We've talked about this on the cast before. I'm really critical of horror movies, but 28 Days Later, that first one, fantastic. Love that movie. World War Z is great as a book or an audiobook or the movie wasn't quite as good as the book, but it is what it is. Book of Eli, Denzel crushed it. So dealer's choice. I'm gonna go all the way around.
All right, Shane.
Book of Eli for me. I just loved the story overall. It was hitting you on a bunch of different layers. There's some subtle stuff, some stuff that hits you right in the face. Really well done, really well executed.
Okay, and last but certainly not least, JT.
I'm going to have to go with 28 Days Later as my first choice, with Book of Eli as a close second.
Yeah, for me, the twist at the end of Book of Eli, and obviously if you haven't read it or watched it, excuse me, I highly recommend it, so I'm not going to spoil it, even though it's an old movie, but the twist at the end, the first time I watched that, I did not see that coming.
Yeah.
So for me, that sense of awe as you watched it, like, wait, what? And then you think back and it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like a lot of times the surprise twist, they either so ham-fisted that you see it coming, or it's so out of left field. It's like, no, they didn't support this. That one, they did just enough to make it work. So I wish
the amount of puns.
Yes.
The amount of puns I'm having to fight right now with you not seeing it coming are just
Yes. All right. And finally, what is your favorite end of the world franchise, James?
Geez, that's a tough one. If we're talking current, like occurring while it's going on, I'm gonna go Pacific Rim, even though they did cancel the apocalypse. But if it's far future afterwards, Firefly, of course. After the Earth that was got blew up.
Okay. Rick.
Firefly first and foremost. We were talking games before the show. Dystopian, love Far Cry. But yeah, Firefly.
Ooh, Far Cry.
Brown coat through and through.
The one thing I liked about Far Cry is the bad guys that they have. The song they made in that was actually pretty catchy, and I'm like, if you didn't know the context of the game and you just heard the song, you would just be like, "What's wrong with that? Keep your gun ready," right? That's like every infantry mantra. Your gun is no use to you if it's not with you. So I don't know, but that's a good one too. All right, what about you, Jesse?
Forgotten Ruin for me. Huge Forgotten Ruin fan. I did love the Fallout and some of the post-apocalyptic games as well, but the Forgotten Ruin book series is huge for me.
Okay, Shane.
The television show Jericho.
Ooh,
that was a good
2
one.
seasons,
It's a good one.
which is sad to me, but I love that show. I couldn't get enough of it. I think I've watched it, 20 times. Absolutely.
That's the one where they canceled it after season 1, and then all the fans started mailing bricks to the studio, symbolically. And then they got one more season out of it. That was, and that was before the internet was super rampant. So I mean that was kind of grassroots at the truest sense. That protest, that's a good choice. All right, what about you, JT?
All right, so Firefly for sure. I am, in fact, a registered browncoat back whenever the movie was launching. But the Deathland series by James Axler, that's my go-to.
You said Deathland by who?
Deathlands by James Axler. I think they officially stopped at 125 paperback copies of the individual stories, and then it's now purely audiobook by Graphic Audio. And I think they're up to 130 now.
Okay. All right. So if we're talking video games, I am going to go with Fallout because, New Carthage Republic forever. I dig it. I've played all of them. If we're looking at TV series, although the Fallout TV series was excellent, they actually kept with the canon and still did their own twist. It wasn't they had a strong female character that didn't try to make her a dude, which really worked. It worked within canon as well. So I really liked that. But I also liked the TV show. Do you guys remember the show Revolution where the power grid goes down? And it kind of goes old school. It didn't get the end of that series, but I really dug the build up to it. And how one of the things it shows, because it sort of starts as everything's falling apart, is you quickly realize that all the people that you thought were powerful when shit's got to get done, they're next to useless. And then all the people that society now would be like, oh, you're a loser, you're just a plumber, are like, holy crap, that guy's leading shit. So I really like that it recognized the reality of how useless most modern careers are in true survival. So, all right. So last but certainly not least, so one of the things that people talk about when they consider the post-apocalypse is the life after mass production of things. So since we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes, or at least for a little bit longer. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it? And then finally, second part of that question, could you survive without that? All right, James.
Tea. I've never been a huge coffee fan. Luckily, I know how to cultivate it, and there is a tea farm not that far from me. So I might be able to get a source. And, of course, my backup, whiskey, that's easily attainable.
Which has a
You know the science behind that.
And you can make your own, too, in a pinch. All right. For homeschooling kids, that's just called science class.
Chemistry 101.
All right. What about you, Rick?
Oh, I'm a coffee guy. I can get by on tea, but I'm a coffee guy. Black, no sugar, no nothing. It has a definite shelf life. After a couple of 3 years and the world dying, unroasted coffee beans will rot out. Instant coffee will get you 4 years if you're really careful with it and keep it good and dry. But I could get by on tea, and yeah, I could cultivate it if I needed to.
Okay. Have you tried chicory as a substitute?
Shit. Sorry. Ugh.
No, I agree with you. I've tried it.
Ugh. My son, number 2 son, has this history of asking for bizarre things for Christmas. And one year he asked for Lithuanian coffee. And I went, they can't cultivate coffee there. And it turns out we found someone who did dried roasted something mushrooms. And God, it was awful. Oh,
Mushroom like that just sounds gross.
yeah, it was.
It's not even the magic mushroom, so you don't even get the fun out of it.
Absolutely vile.
Yeah, chicory's gross too. That's, if you don't know, dear listener, for the during the American Civil War, that's what the South was resorting to when they couldn't get imports. So they did chicory instead of coffee, and it's gross.
They still do.
Some do.
If they do that willingly, they've just maybe that we need to reopen the asylums for them because that stuff's gross. All right, Jesse.
I'm just going to say, just like the people that drink buttermilk, if you're still doing that because you got a choice. Anyway, hot chocolate. I'm definitely a hot chocolate person.
You can make
I could survive without it. And I already practice my own home fermentations, so I definitely could make some alcohol if things got rough.
Is cocoa beans that the chocolate is based off? Can you grow that in the States?
Yeah,
I don't think so. I don't think they do a good job.
Maybe.
That's the only one, because I mean, if you could grow it, you could easily make it, but I don't think it's that hard to grow. I just don't know if it would acclimate to our weather. I don't know. That's something I'll have to do some looking on. If I ever write Post-Apoc, now I know what my research pattern is going to be for. All right, so hot chocolate and fermented beverages, of course, excellent choice. Shane.
My go-to is black coffee. I drink about a pot of it every day, far too much. Post-apocalyptic, I guess I'd live without it. I'd substitute the blood of my enemies, I guess.
Excellent answer. And finally, JT.
Yep, black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Surviving without it, yeah, it'd be painful, but I could do it. Definitely resort to tea after that, though.
So I do, generally I drink my coffee with cream. I could live without it, I guess, if I really had to, although I probably wouldn't be very nice to be around. But that's where investigating alternatives that you could source yourself becomes very important. So if you ever get a hint that the apocalypse is coming, people, start doing your research while the internet still works. And obviously booze is one that I really need to learn to make my own. I know the owner of Three Ravens makes his own mead, and I've always wanted to try that. But right now,
3 gallons over there.
Nice.
Yeah, me and JT both.
Oh, you make mead too?
Yeah.
Yeah, me and JT both.
I tried some.
Simple to make.
Yeah, I've tried that. That's good. I tried mead because I saw 13th Warrior and they're drinking mead, and I'm like, I'd really like to try that. And then I did, and it tasted just like a dry wine. It was very disgusting. And so I was talking to Hillbilly about that, William Joseph Roberts. He's like, well, then you're not drinking the right kind. It's just like beer. There's a whole different flavor palette among all of them. So we actually have in Virginia the Black Snake Meadery, if it's still open. It's in the mountains. So it's been on my list of places I'd like to do the tour of the facility, and then you can do all the sampling just to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much like wine. It's technically honey wine, but there's people that love dessert wine, and there's people that love dry wine, and there's everything in between. You can mix fruits and spices and all kinds of stuff in. If you like tea, you can use things like hibiscus to add extra flavor. It gets really varied. It's a lot of fun, and it's actually pretty easy.
I fortify some of mine with rum.
Yeah, there we go.
Now, for the record, you can greenhouse coffee.
Ah,
Does a greenhouse to be able to do that need anything other than the glass partitions in the weather control? I mean, do you need a power grid to make that work?
Warm, moist, tropics, 25th latitude, that kind of thing.
You can do passive, yeah, JR. You
Okay.
can do passive.
I haven't done that much research on greenhouses. I know it's something I want to. I've looked into some of the ones where they bury them, but in my area, the water table's too high for any of that. So I have to wait until I know where I'm going to buy my homestead at and go from there. But all right, so since we've got that out of the way, let's talk about the post-apocalyptic. So first, what is the post-apocalyptic? Obviously, that's the end of modernity in various forms. I think, generally speaking, anything that takes you back from modern technology, I don't think it has to be Stone Age. I think, black powder and horse-drawn stuff would technically, in my opinion, be post-apoc. What say you guys? Do you have a certain standard of what makes the post-apocalyptic as far as the world after?
Social collapse. That's my threshold.
Okay, so you could have modern tech and social collapse, and you'd be okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think pretty similar government collapse, infrastructure collapse. Your supply chains no longer exist. Those sorts of scenarios, I think would kind of qualify in my book.
community isolation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Does post-apocalyptics have to be global for it to be post-apoc?
Nope.
Not at all.
So if you're cut off for various reasons and you're living primitive, that would work for you. If the rest of the world wasn't, you'd still consider that post-apoc?
I would.
There's so many series that are like
Carolinas right now. I think they're dealing with it.
That's what made me think of the question.
Yeah, so the book 5 Seconds Later, the EMP attack over North America, everything in North America is basically wiped out, and then other entities roll in to take advantage of that. I think that in my book would qualify. So yeah, just in an isolated area where you have apocalyptic scenario, I think it would satisfy the requirement in my book.
Yeah. I think it's important that it's your characters that are experiencing that, be it TV show, game, whatever. What movie was it? That M. Night Shyamalan movie, was it The Village? That it was that one village that was isolated, and she stumbles on a freeway at the end. Yeah, so that doesn't count as a modern movie. It's still like a medieval village. For 99% of the movie, that doesn't really count. But if your characters are experiencing that, if they're going through apocalyptic scenarios, then that I would count that. And that's why I count Forgotten Ruin, because there are some cities, there's some, it's kind of a magic setting, but the whole idea is that there was this big virus that caused this whole apocalypse. And so you can still have a bastion of civilization, but widespread civilization has been destroyed. At least for me.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything to that? All right. So first, what would you miss the most when the world ends? We're going to do a little bit of the personal, and then we'll go more broad topics after the commercial. For me, since we've previously discussed, the coffee is definitely what I'm going to miss. And
Creature comforts.
The books too, because a lot of the series that aren't in print, because most people are buying ebooks these days. If the world ends, I might not have those books. So
Best place you could hold up is the library.
True, but a lot of the books I like are being produced outside of the traditional markets, which means that they're not tend to be in libraries. And unfortunately, if you're buying print on demand to get the books in print from those authors, Amazon books tend to not hold up as well as some of the other manufacturers' physical copies. I mean, so it is what it is. So that's what I would miss. What about you, Shane? What are you gonna miss?
Gasoline. I mean, if you can't move things around with heavy equipment, it's going to be a pain in the ass. I mean, once everything collapses, everything takes longer. Everything requires more work. And one of the first things that's going to disappear is gasoline, because that's going to get burned up quick. Any type of fossil fuel, and people are going to feel that right away. You want to farm anything, you need, diesel fuel, gasoline. Oh, well, we could use horses and mules. Yeah, where are those? They don't exist right now. It would take generations to breed animals to go work farms and things like that. So yeah, fossil fuels, I think I would miss right away.
I'll disagree with the stock animals. It depends upon where you live, and where you're setting your story.
Sure.
But you're right. Gasoline has a short shelf life, although you can manufacture it. There are what are called portable distilleries that will allow you to manufacture. It's actually one of the things I researched for my stories, so they can continue to use.
I agree, and I met some farmers out in Kansas that were making their biodiesel and things like that. But as far as the animals go, I live near Amish country, and there's animals all over the place here, except there aren't enough for guys like me. They have enough for themselves, and they wouldn't be sharing when the group.
That's true, they wouldn't.
You have to join
Do
the
the
community.
Amish believe in weapons? Because they might be in trouble when the end comes.
Well, that's where me and the Amish would work out a deal.
Okay. All right. What about you, Pittman? What are you going to miss?
I'm
James?
sorry, who?
James.
I'm just gonna go easy and say like movies, just because I can probably figure out a way to make old like DVDs and stuff work for a while, but I get bored, and all the work and everything wouldn't have time to watch, but where I'm at, I can probably make it for a little while. But yeah, I'd miss the movies. I'd miss the entertainment stuff, especially like anime imports and stuff, multinational, because we're not getting any of that anymore.
Fair. All right, Rick, what are you missing?
Well, I mean, depending upon the infrastructure in which you've got, electricity is a big one. Electricity gives you control of your environment. As I said, you can manufacture gasoline, so you can manufacture artificial horsepower for certain things. And obviously you can manufacture with solar as well, or wind turbine.
Biodiesel.
A lot of work to go with that. Refrigeration will ultimately break down. And I hate to say that, ice cream.
Yes.
Life without ice cream is no life at all.
All right. Finally, Jesse.
Well, so I know I could make it if I could find the salt. That's just going to be the struggle, and I'd have to make it in the winter when we were already freezing. AC and like being able to cool things, being able to make ice. I'm a Southern kid, grew up in Georgia, and so no matter how terrible it was outside, at the end of the day, I got to come into AC and ice water. And not having those things and trying to live here, being able to sleep, it would take me 3 years to adjust to sleeping without a fan. So things of that nature would 100% be the struggle for me.
So for me, I'm definitely going to miss the plumbing, because I've used porta potties in outhouses in my time in the infantry, and I can just tell you those are unpleasant. Especially when you have to dig them or burn them because you were a young specialist or corporal who didn't shut up when he should have. So I have, in fact, burned shit and started with an oar. So I would miss plumbing and all the creature comforts, but also coffee in the book. So yeah, modernity is easy for me as far as the rest of it goes. All right, so what do you think are the common end of the world tropes that people use that cause this societal breakdown? And from here on out, we're just kind of doing open source. Anybody can talk.
And the biggest one's the nuclear war.
Okay.
Disease, whether it's like plague or zombie virus or something like that, some kind of disease we have no defenses against.
Yeah, that was going to be mine with zombies.
You said zombies and diseases. I do think zombies are actually realistic, though.
Well, they're awesome. That's for sure. I love.
I mean,
writing.
I enjoy reading them, but is that an actual realistic threat for a post-apoc? I mean, I know there's lots of fiction on it, and I enjoy reading it, but as far as realistic end of the world scenarios, what would you say? I can see the EMP, the nuclear war.
Yeah.
I can see just general disease vectors we're not ready for.
Fungal outbreak.
Yeah. The what's it, cordyceps?
An outbreak as a result of famine and warfare is a good one. And, human history is fraught with crossover from the animal and fauna world to causing disease. There are fungus out there that generate zombie-like things with insects and other things.
Yep.
Won't take much for that to cross over.
Nope.
Yeah, and that was going to be my defense. That was going to be my defense for zombies, is we've seen that both science and nature itself have showed that fungi can pilot other creatures. So in insects, there's a fungus that literally drives spiders around. And some absolutely, you didn't stop to think if you should, and only if you could, scientists decided to make robots that run off fungus.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry, but
nice.
Yeah, so hear me out.
Shoot them now.
The government working on a biological weapon, but due to poor surety practices, it gets loose in the world.
Oh, you mean like Captain Trip?
More like Wuhan.
I was
I don't
actually
know what you're
thinking.
talking about. It was the bats.
I think that all of the we spent so long thinking if we could, we didn't think about who we should or if we should. Jesse, your quote from Jurassic Park. Really, it comes down to a lot of them. I think the most believable cause would be human hubris. Playing with science we weren't quite ready for, and it got out of hand. To include AIs, I think that's entirely feasible as technology kind of keeps developing. But we're going to pause for a moment before we dive deeper into this topic, and we're going to shamelessly shill for the man.
What will you do when the world goes belly up? Will you paint stripes on your cheeks, grab your flaming guitar, and enjoy the glorious post-apocalypse party? Or will you gnash your teeth and wail at the loss of civilization? Either way, we've a story for you. This post-apocalyptic collection has 15 great stories, each with its own spin on our future. Dive right into From the Ashes, a Bayonet Books anthology, before the future becomes now.
All right, thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude, and now we're back talking about the post-apocalypse. So,
Story in that anthology.
it's a good one. I really like it. That's one of the reasons.
We talked about this in the episode you and I did on Genesis Renewed. I'm expanding that one into the next novel in that world.
Nice. What do you think? So we've talked a little bit about what the anthologies are, or anthologies, what the ending of the worlds is. What do you think as far as like the tropes that fit in that genre, like that you see a lot of? What do you think is most realistic in those?
Well, the one thing we didn't discuss earlier is nature.
Okay.
There have been periods of time where super volcano causes global winter, and you've got ice age or you've got massive die-off. The one out of Sumatra about 70,000 years ago, the world population went down to something like 10, 20,000 people.
Yep.
And they've taken the mitochondria DNA back to a handful of Eves, if you will, for most of the world population. So there's that one as well. I mean, the left half of the United States is sitting on a super volcano between Mammoth and Yellowstone.
Yep.
Well, there's the book Lucifer's Hammer, right?
Oh, love Lucifer's Hammer. Great read.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Natural occurrence. Comet strike, meteor strike.
That's what I was just going to say. Like 13,000 years ago, after the Younger Dryas, was like supposedly a comet explosion, kind of like Tunguska over North America. And it's supposed to be the origin of all the flood myths because it was a giant global flood that wiped out who knows how much.
Speaking of the Tunguska, Rick also wrote that book too.
A book called Tunguska Deception uses the Tunguska event as the inciting event.
And we did an interview on that one, I think, in season 3. Pretty sure it was season 3. But so, for me, like the most believable trope, I guess, you see in there is we revert to being more tribal. So you see local clans forming up by region that are kind of, I'll defend my turf, no further. We don't want your kind here, that kind of stuff. Yeah. That exists because there's protection in groups. And you can't have a security there if everybody can come and go. You can't provide safety and resources to share if your borders are porous, as far as like when resources are not as abundant. So I think the tribalism that you see, I don't think it'll go quite Lord of the Flies, but I mean, it could get there. I could see that happening.
It could.
Our province, Afghanistan. Very tribalistic, fighting over limited resources.
Look at what happened at the Superdome after Katrina.
Yep.
Well, I think
the
big issue.
So what am I missing on Hurricane Katrina, the Superdome? I know they sent people there.
So during Katrina, side note, I was affected by it. I was also to the east of New Orleans, so I was fairly safe. My neighborhood kind of congealed around each other, and we helped out. The Superdome was a dangerous place. A lot of people in the city went there because they didn't heed the evacuation warnings and get out in time. Then when the floodwater started rolling in, every exit was cut off. So the Superdome became a place of safety for a lot of people for a little while. Then once law and order started breaking down within the city, you had gang members walking up to the open doors of police stations and unloading AK-47s through the door. There were lots of reports of violent gangs running around inside the Superdome, basically doing whatever they wanted, and small clusters of people having to get together and basically stand watch for these gangs to try to fend them off as they came around looking to do whatever they wanted to do. And this happened a lot. There was a lot of violence that happened inside the Superdome once that enforcement of order was gone. The people had to do it themselves. And a lot of people that went there were not capable of doing that, even in the groups that they clustered together in. And unfortunately, they paid the price.
Goes to show you an armed society is a polite society.
That's right.
So does anybody else want to add anything to that as far as like the tropes that you think are most believable?
It's the technological reliance. I mean, that's the big thing, is that the vast majority of people rely on technology for the basics of life. And most people throughout their day-to-day lives, they don't recognize how terrifying that is. Because a couple days without grocery trucks and your whole neighborhood is starving. A couple days without grocery trucks and your whole city is now having to find some new way to distribute dwindling resources. And that's when people get nasty, because for the most people, and in a way you can't blame them, for most people, if it comes down to me or you or my kids or your kids eating, might makes right suddenly pops up a whole lot more when it comes down to it. So I think that's the most believable trope that exists, is that when people come down to brass tacks, they put themselves and their families first.
I did retail in high school, and one of the things you learn is as we got more technologically advanced, we went with the supplies delivered quickly model. So most grocery stores only have 3 days worth of supplies inside, and then they count on resupply. So even just shutting down the ports and the roads, you're already going to see stuff. We saw, I guess, with the COVID stuff, how people were doing the panic buying and the hoarding. Now throw that in with no law and order, and you got a few people with guns, and suddenly some of that stuff you saw in The Walking Dead makes a lot more sense. So All right. So, what do you think that people get wrong the most when they're telling post-apoc stories?
That large numbers can be sustained within a tribe. There's this thing called Dunbar's number, which is basically the most amount of social connections one can maintain. And it's also found a strong correlation, anthropologically speaking, where the size of the tribe is equal to the size of that number. So if you try to, go into JT's, put that many people in the Superdome, if it's beyond that, like 200 or 300 people you can reliably form a social connection with, you're going to have immediate outsiders in a close proximity for those same resources. So it's one thing they get right a lot, but one thing they get wrong a whole lot is when they try to maintain like modern society levels of habitation, we'll say. They also get it right when they do like the roving bands, and it's no more than like 50, 100, max like 200. At that point, if you can't remember somebody's name, they tend to split off and be outsiders or be, ostracized.
One thing that I thought that's really good resources, I can't remember who did the documentary. They called it Life After Humans, and basically they didn't give you the cause of what made all of humanity just instantly disappear. But and I'll find a link to it, dear listener. It'll be in the show notes. But basically, they started looking at what happens to the world if humans aren't in it to maintain it. And that's a good idea in general to see what happens when society breaks down. Like the little dogs die off, the dogs mostly go feral and roam in packs. You end up with, some of the power grid would go critical because if it's not maintained, it's going to go off. You hope the fail-safe on the nuclear sites works, so it shuts down and contains itself. But if not, that takes whole regions out and potentially causes mutations.
And nature will reclaim just about everything a lot faster than people realize.
Yes.
I mean, look at Chernobyl. You got, spores and mushrooms eating the radiation there. A whole lot faster.
What's scary about that is those spores are only found there. Where'd they come from?
Mutations.
Yeah.
The other thing is people, I think they get wrong if they try to have this cheerful idea of everybody making it somewhere safe. Realistically, if you're in a city, most of those people will die in the first week.
Yep.
And if you can get out, great. But I mean, you start flooding the countryside, those guys got guns and they want to defend theirs. So chances are you're gonna meet the business end of a shotgun and here your type aren't welcome there.
That's one of the best lines in like Zombieland.
Oh, I haven't seen that
halfway
one.
through.
Right.
Halfway through, and he finds the Hummer, and he's like, "Oh, God bless rednecks." Fully loaded arsenal.
Yeah.
I think there's a big misconception of how easy it is to hunt, fish, and farm.
That's what I was going to say.
Well, the other part of that is with the amount of humans we have right now, if we intended to entirely live off of that hunting, fishing, and farming, we're going to decimate. There's just not enough to sustain at that level without modernity for farming styles. And then how much of that modern farming is industrialized single crop yield just a lot of it's corn because of the subsidies from the government. And you can eat corn, you could turn it into popcorn, but only so much. Yeah. And so you end up
on those same lines, go for the strategic cheese reserve. That's what a lot of the dairy supplement ends up going to. They make cheese out of it and they've stuck it in like caverns across the US.
The other one is they still pay farmers or I guess herders to stockpile wool for old military uniforms that we haven't worn in 100 years, but we still have the subsidy so people get paid. So somewhere the government stockpiles wool if you need to make your own clothes because, your modern clothes are going to wear out pretty quickly. They're intended to not last. So your reenacting friends are going to be very popular because they're going to know how to outfit you in clothing.
Reenactments and cosplayers.
Well, yeah, making clothes. That's another one.
Plus all the engineering that goes into the costumes.
The amount of work it takes to go from raw wool to actual fabric and felting, and then it's incredible.
Or to make a pair of shoes.
Oh yeah.
Well, without the rubber, even that gets Like, it's weird because people are used to rubber soles. I mean, if you're not, I mean, like, think about what rubber comes from. It's going to be hard for you to get enough to mass outfit people. You're going to end up with things like moccasins or the wooden.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say wood and grass lined, like the ancient Neanderthal. There's a famous guy that was found in the mountain pass. That's what they did, and it was they recreated those.
Otski or whatever, the Iceman.
Yeah, the Iceman. It's like Ozark. But his,
that's the thing. You know, we take things like shoes for granted, and that would be something that once your shoes wear out and you can't find more, what are you gonna do?
And that's
Strip
something
tires.
for a little bit.
All sorts of
For a
things.
little, yeah. You only have so many tires out there.
Yeah, that's one of the things I know Shane and I went to instantly because we were infantry. It's like feet. What are we gonna do? Because if your feet fail you, you're screwed because you got to stand up to do all those tasks.
Or your back because you're doing manual labor all the time.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings up medicine, which is another huge thing. Like not having access to antibiotics, and this ties into violence and how often the violence is wrong. Without antibiotics, if you get stabbed with a rusty spear or a fire-hardened wooden spear, even if you heal the wound, the amount of pathogens, the infection, the whole terrible thing, that's honestly like why I learned how to make alcohol. Is in a pinch, alcohol is a very good disinfectant if you have nothing else.
Well,
And it's
you don't even need to get wounded before you can get sick. I mean, keeping clean water and a place to go take a dump, away from everybody else.
You've died of
There's all
dysentery.
these things, yeah, people get sick just from the environment because they're not used to having these artificialities of clean water and sewer systems to, all of it.
And then the other one is the with the most people don't realize when you talk about violence, and we're not talking about just human on human, because if you're going to hunt for your food, that's violence too. And those animals aren't just going to lay over for you to cut their necks. Like you're talking wild, because pigs will go feral very quickly, and they're going to end up becoming boars. I don't know why it happens, but they change on their own if you release them into the wild. And they're nasty. And those tusks, I mean, if you think about that as violence too, more people up until modern war, more people died from the infections after the wound than died from actual combat in just about every war up until recent times.
That's one of the more realistic things about Game of Thrones was Robert Baratheon getting gored and killed by the boar.
Yeah.
Everything else, but he died on a boar hunt.
He died from being drunk.
That's the other one that those of us who are of the right age, when we went to play Oregon Trail and we all died of dysentery, like JT said earlier, that was there because that was realistic. The one that gets me is the ones that want to set themselves on Hawaii. I just those islands aren't going to support the amount of people there. Like 3/4 of everyone there will die instantly because they will run out of food.
Just die from sun exposure.
Starving in North America is going to go fast. Yeah, Hawaii will do something else.
Yeah.
Level.
Yeah, but you can grow coffee in Hawaii.
True.
They also have volcanoes, so it's a trade-off.
And the ocean, there's. I'll say this for Hawaii: if you were one of the people there that makes your living things like something like spearfishing, you probably have a better shot than your average urbanite that has no idea how to hunt fish or otherwise feed themselves without modern equipment.
Well, so plus you've got a pretty good barrier against invasion.
Oh yeah. So speaking of food sourcing, so one of the things I noticed that people get wrong is the assumption of the shelf life of various foods. So they just assume, like Fallout does it too, that you just 50 years later you're still going to be able to go to that grocery store and whatever's left you can snag it and eat it. Like no, that's how you get the all frozen. And so that's the one people also get wrong is how long that food will last. I think you get 2 to 3 year shelf life on most professionally canned goods. We're thinking Campbell's, that kind of thing. You get 5 to 10 if you can it yourself. There are some preserved family meal kits for emergencies that'll last 25 years. I think MREs are 5. So even if you're intentionally stockpiling for the end of the world, food has a shelf life. I mean, that's some point in time you have to make a
You know, all that stuff is going to get eaten in the first year.
Yep.
While people are relearning how to farm. Again, relearning.
Assuming they can learn to farm and sustain crops.
Right. And then, oh, by the way, once you harvest, how do you preserve it through your first winter with no electricity? You know, because it's got to last. And all these little art forms are lost. You know, some people know about, you know, root cellars and keeping carrots and onions and potatoes in sand and root cellars over the winter, and they'll last for months, and how you can preserve eggs, and that's all great stuff. Or you can make kimchi pots and, you know, ferment vegetables and bury them in the yard and keep them cool, but not freezing. You know, there's techniques out there, but do most people know any of this stuff?
And there's the ice cellar
about this stuff. Who's actually done it? Who's actually tried to do it?
And then I hear a lot of times people's advice are download these books on your phone in case of an emergency. Ooh, that works great until power fails. You need physical copies of things for your references, and nobody does that anymore.
Or the EMP fries your phone.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. Reference library. Who keeps like hard copy reference libraries for this kind of stuff?
I do.
Yeah.
At some point in time, I do want to build my own reference library, but right now that's expensive and my budget is real.
Well, and I think that leads into the hero. Like, so one of the most unrealistic things in post-apoc probably a lot of times is who your hero is. And don't give me no discredit to my military members who have been through SEER training and everything like that. You guys are awesome, and you're going to make it longer than almost everybody else. But I think the people who really have the best shot are the people that already live that way. Your dudes that are coming out of Alaska, your dudes that live way up in the hills of the Appalachians, things like that they live this way already. No electricity, just 100%. You and the mule.
When I was in Ranger school, they taught us how to, you know, find food, you know, kill a chicken and cook it. And then you made a stew out of a rusty coffee can over an open fire. And I'm like, how in the fuck are we going to go on a patrol and find carrots and potatoes and a chicken wandering around? I can cook in a rusty fucking coffee can in the woods. This is the most unrealistic fucking thing I've ever seen. Yeah, I agree with you. The military might train a few unrealistic things.
Shoot and skin a rabbit and throw it over the fire.
Well, that's the other thing is people just assume you kill it and you eat it. If you don't field dress it right, you get infected food that will make you sick.
Yep.
Which is where the joke about, you know, roadkill and, you know, you're going to eat it. Well, I mean, hopefully it was fresh when you grabbed it, because otherwise you're just, you know, intestinal death right there for you, because you're not going to make it.
Culture an animal's large intestine, and you just got all your meat covered in shit.
Yep. That's what I was going to go. I was going to say ruptured organs, bile all over everything. You busted a gallbladder, and now it's.
I mean,
and some of the
shot a deer before by accident, you know,
and
real thing.
The other part of that is eventually all the people that rely for as far as their defense on modern weapons, eventually you do run out of bullets and powder. If you don't know how to make, you know, flintlock, black powder, and you can't source the powder, that's a problem too. I mean, you could in the U.S. if you're listening in the U.S. you could get the supplies locally, but you have to know what you're doing. And locally is you know, regional, because if you're in Utah, for instance, I don't know that you might be out of luck. So
yeah, that's one thing that I see a lot is the abundance of ammunition that's out there in the stories.
Well, it's got a shelf life, 7 to 10 years, maybe 12.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other thing is a lot of these survival types, that's all they focus in on is the gun slinging. You know, I got AR-15s and all these weapons and night vision and all this shit. But they don't know how to, you know, do any of the rest of it. Like we talked about farming and, you know, heating a house. How do you put a wood stove in? You know, how do you do any of that stuff?
How do you insulate against the chill?
You know, all of it. But, you know, everybody wants to talk about the shoot 'em up action stuff, but that's not probably the most important thing. It is important. You know, when somebody comes to take your shit, yeah, that's important. But the rest of it is probably way more important to get you from day to day.
And I will say growing things is a challenge. Even if you just do the work, doesn't mean you're going to get the results. Because I started a victory garden when COVID hit, because what else were we going to do? And I have been trying year after year, and I've yet to get a successful crop. I kill a lot of plants. I have fun doing it, but I have yet to actually grow anything. Well, I'll take that back. I got one like dime-sized little potato in my effort that I did throw in a meal, just so I can say I did. But like, there's a skill to not just like growing it, but how do you defend it against the crops that, or the creatures that would eat the crops and all that kind of thing? Because I've lost it to bugs and slugs and molds, and I mean,
my dad tried growing apple trees, and the first year the deer killed all of them. You know,
there is such a thing as a black thumb, JR.
I believe I have one.
There's some people who just can't grow shit.
I have family members that are that way, that keep buying plants and keep killing them.
And then there are other people who simply look at the dirt and set something, and it goes, whoa.
So, and then that's the other thing is some of the sustainable skills that our ancestors did have, like some of the food sources that they made, we could still make, like pemmican, I think is how you say it. It's a, yeah, but like most people, even if you've heard of it, you don't really know what it is or how to make it. It's a high density, high calorie food source that's compact and lightweight for traveling. Because if you're going to have to be mobile, I mean, can you actually afford all those heavy cans of soup, whether you canned it or whether it was Campbell's that canned it? Like, you've got to be able to travel with that. And that's not something people often think about either.
Yeah,
So
I mean, there's all sorts of little tricks out there. I mean, you know, you eat, if you're eating all meat all the time, you can get scurvy. But, you know, you can go to a fir tree and boil the needles and get vitamin C out of it and prevent that. I mean, there's things that are lost sciences that most people don't know anymore.
Well, and then speaking of, a lot of that is also regional, because what grows in your region is going to matter. So it's not just one size fits all. It's factoring in your local like weather zone as far as what's available is going to be a thing too, that you never see anyone factor in. They go a little more generic.
Yeah. Well, and then there's dealing with the weather, right?
Yep.
As, you know, I did Jesse James. You live in Georgia. I live in Michigan. Our weather's a little different. You got to take those
Shane,
little
you have
environmental
weather.
factors, you know, into consideration. How do you
Well,
make
also
one season the next?
building styles matter too. So if you think about it, I don't know if any of you have been to historic sites. Like I live near Colonial Williamsburg, so I go there periodically. One thing people don't realize is if you're building a building to be airtight because you've got central air and central heat, you build it differently, and that goes against you and creates moldy environments if you don't have that going, because you don't have proper air circulation. Whereas that's why older buildings, they had taller roof or taller ceilings, because you wanted the airflow. You had the windows, the transom windows over the doors to prevent air or to promote airflow. And so that's one of the reasons people tend to think, oh, in the past they were shorter. Well, some of that is because malnutrition, and some of that it's the physical appearance, because the ceilings were higher. So it created the appearance of everything else being smaller. And you did that because you wanted air circulation to allow you to handle the heat or the cold or whatever. And we tend to build one size fits all nowadays because we rely on the power grid and the central temperature control. So that the older buildings, ironically, would probably suit you better in the end times than some of the newer ones.
Well, the newer ones will fall apart within a few years because of the way that they're built.
Yeah.
They fall apart in a few years anyway.
Lack of material maintenance.
Yeah.
So
well, maintenance is going to be critically important. Like I mentioned before, nature's going to try to reclaim everything. How are you going to keep things fixed when Ace hardware doesn't exist anymore?
and a lot of this.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
As I say, a lot of the skills that you would need, you don't think about, like the smithing, the blacksmith, the silversmith, because silver, I mean, aside from it looking fancy in silverware, like silver actually has properties that they would use as far as antibacterial and anti-rust. So there's a reason silverware, it was made out of silver to help promote like resistance to that thing. And so there's a lot of skill sets that we don't use in modernity that would suddenly become important again, like the person, the cloth, sewing the thing, building your gun for more primitive things. All those skills will matter again.
Or cast iron.
Yeah. The first is going to be the great die-off, and then what do you do with all those bodies to prevent the diseases as well?
You leave them in the rotting houses and let them decay.
As long as you can, you're living far away from the rotting houses, but I mean, diseases can get airborne, and you might regret having not dealt with that.
There's a great book by a guy named Bill Bass. It's based on the first Death's Acre at the University of Tennessee. And it talks about largely forensic anthropology, but it also talks about disease and body rot and other things and how quickly things occur. And body rot and die-off for disease isn't as big a deal as long as it's not dealing with groundwater or something into the food source.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting. All right, so we've gone on it for about an hour. This is a really wide topic, so I knew we would have follow-on episodes. So if you have, dear listener, if you have more of my narrow targeted questions that you want us to talk about as far as subjects for episodes, comment in the comment section, and we'll happy to have everyone back. I mean, this is a fun topic. I enjoy thinking about it. Anyone who's ever done camping or wilderness survival type stuff, like you've analyzed this to death, and there's still more you could probably do. So with that, James, what are you writing at the moment? Keep in mind, this will be airing in December, so think future James.
Future James should be done with the third Felix book, Off Chance, and should be starting in on the second Pandora Squad about this time. We have the editor books for years. So that's what I'll be writing.
Okay. And how can listeners and viewers at home find you on the wild interwebs?
You can find me at halfacrepond.com or on the socials. Facebook is JE Pittman Writes, and on everything else, I have either some activity or at least the name parked as j.e.pittman.
Nice. All right, Rick, future you will be writing what in December?
Future me in December will be finishing the third book in the Genesis Renewed series, tentatively titled Genesis Alone. Protagonist is a college kid in the middle of BFE nowhere, Saskatchewan, and the world died. No life skills, and what do you do? Easiest way to find me is rickshaw.com.
All right. And James, what is future you writing?
I mean, Jesse James, outlaw author.
That's me. Future me will be working.
Sorry, Jesse. Good catch.
Cool. I got you. Future me will be working on the Holy Diver in the Midnight Sea, which is a bar at the center of or really the edge of a trans-dimensional sea that touches anywhere and any when, and all of the crazy adventures that ensue from all the people that get sucked into the Bermuda Triangle nonsense that ends up happening all across the universe. I'll have a novel and a anthology coming out with a lot of your favorite writers. So
nice.
Yeah, that's what I'm working on.
We did, since we're talking about the apocalypse, we didn't cover what life at sea might look like, but if you've seen Master and Commander, you get the basic idea. So, all right, Shane, what are you writing at future? What is future you writing, and then how can they find you?
So right now I'm writing a future mercenary book, like mercenaries in outer space, that sort of deal, inspired by Hammer Slammers, Galaxy's Edge, that sort of thing. It's going to be called Death Dealers, Gun for Hire. And that should be out, so hopefully sometime next year. And you can find me on Facebook in my Facebook group called Shane's Rally Point. So come check us out.
Okay. And JT, what will future you be writing?
Future me will be writing it's kind of hard to describe. It's a vigilante action mystery with a Lovecraftian twist.
You had me at Lovecraft. Go on.
It's going to be interesting. I'm still in the planning stages of it, but I should be done this month.
Okay, and then how can listeners and viewers at home find you?
All across the socials, JT Arralle. I've got a website. I don't update it as often as I should, but that's jtarralle.com.
Okay. And I will probably at some point start compiling, dear listener, when we start writing, like talking about these topics and we start giving a list of books we recommend in the genre. At some point in time, I will get around to actually starting to write those all down, and then we'll have a blog post somewhere where we reference all of them so you can check them out yourself, because a lot of books that are hard to find if you don't know to look for them, because they're some of the older ones, but they're still excellent, are worth checking out. So at some point in time in the future, that is something we're going to be working on, writing those books down by title and getting that a little bit more organized. So this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. They help the right readers find the right books. So seriously, do your part. It makes a huge difference, especially when you're talking about the indie authors we know and love. It does help other readers say, hey, this sounds like something I might like. And the more other people buy the book, the more the author keeps writing that series, and you get more of the crack you love to ingest. So it's a win-win. You can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the bits, shoots, the rumbles, the YouTube, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people, we have Madam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. For the shenanigans, send them her way. She's here for it. If you go to the Linktree, you can click on our website over there at Spotify, and for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. These episodes aren't free to produce, and as you were listening to this one, we will be scrambling to find another recording platform, since StreamYards is going from $100 a year to $500 a year, and ain't nobody got the money for that. For a labor of love, I do for free. So we will be looking for new hosting sites. So if you're listening to this and you've got ideas, hit me up on my socials, because we'll be looking to outsource that when our contract ends. Speaking of supporting the show, you could do so more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee until they float away on a river of Java. And we have to stock up, people, because if the end times come, we need a little bit of a cash, against the end. Got to make it bearable for just a little bit longer. If you use the code in the show notes, Podcast Grunt, you get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. So you can help us and help you get the show we hope you enjoy listening to. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right. Thanks for coming on, everybody. We had a blast. I did, at least. So we appreciate it. And we'll have to have you all back again, because I knew this topic would lead to future ones. So we will see you again, hopefully soon. And with that, I'm going to hit the end button. Wait for it.